Hey there everyone. We're going to do some very rare trinkets today, boss trinkets and trinkets you can get from enemies. I'm not going to include hero trinkets for now because there's a massive list of them. I think I'll also just sum all of this up, do one for hero trinkets. I'll probably even combine the Crimson Court and Colors of Madness in a separate video. Thus, in the end, there should be 4 trinket videos total. I'm hoping to do that sooner than later, but you never know with schedules and also maybe the demand. Therefore, starting where we left off, we're going to start with the Book of Sanity. It's a straight up minus 20% stress, which is very good. I often find myself putting Books of Sanity on individuals who are probably in the back row. I know famously I usually put this on the Vestal. She has a low dodge and also seems to be the target of a lot of stressful incantations and also tempting goblets. Other individuals who this is perfect on are pretty much people who you traditionally see get targeted by stress damage dealers. This may change from dungeon to dungeon. Other individuals who may benefit from this are often probably your DPS who have lower dodge. The Book of Sanity is a pretty strong item, and I often keep probably about 3 to 5 in my inventory just because of how versatile they can be, and it's almost never a bad choice. If you don't know what trinket you should add to that hero. We come to the Cleansing Crystal, which can only be found in the Warrens. 40% Blight, 40% Bleed, and 40% debuff resistance. That's pretty strong in all 3 of those. Now, obviously, we're going to get minus 15% chances in Blight, Bleed, and debuff. Therefore, you may not want to use this on a more versatile individual. This is probably a DPS and tank related item who don't rely on maybe the bleed or debuffing chance. As I said, this definitely works well with your larger HP. As I said, this works well with people who really aren't focusing in any of these 3 categories, because almost minus 20% skill chance is actually pretty significant since the average is 140. Thus, you'd be down around 120, 125, and if an average resistance is 60 to 75%, you would just reduce your 75-80% chance down to effectively a 60% chance, which is not something you want to do with Bleed, Blight, and debuff abilities. Often those abilities have those added benefits for a reason, because the initial damage is too low, or the skill does no damage and you need to rely on that debuff. Therefore, your tank-related people are going to be very good with this related item, or even your DPS that do raw damage, such as maybe a shield breaker, without doing some of her blight DOTs. She has very strong blight DOTs, so maybe I wouldn't pick her. But if you do a highwayman who isn't going to use open vein, it'd be good on him. Obviously, it'd be good on a Hellion if you're not using bleed abilities. Leper Crusaders don't have any of these, so they'd be a pretty good target as well. Ethereal Crucifix. This is one of those items I just don't really know why it exists in the game. 25% damage versus Eldritch, pretty strong. 30% bleed resistance, pretty strong. But the minus 20% max HP, maybe if you put this on somebody who has a ridiculously high HP pool and you just want to do some serious damage against Eldritch, go for it. I personally think a quicker item you can get is the Eldritch Slayer Ring, which does the 25% damage, doesn't decrease your HP by 20%. Now obviously you're losing 8 dodge instead of 30 bleed resistance. Honestly, I'd rather take minus 8 dodge than 30% bleed, because depending on what you're fighting, it may not bleed you anyways. Now, if you do have this on a high HP hero, this would obviously be a great Eldritch related item. You could even pair this with the Eldritch Slayer Ring, though at that point, minusing your HP and dodge might be like a double negative, and you're really asking for them to get hit a lot then. May not be the best. I often just found myself using the Eldritch Ring or another item that gives me 25% damage without the whole minusing HP thing. I think that's my biggest concern about it. Minus 20% HP is pretty large. If you take someone who's at 40 health, they're now down to 32. That might be a whole nother attack you just let through, and if they don't, like I said, if they really don't do any bleed attacks, who really cares? Focus Ring. Focus Ring is a great item. I often find myself having probably about 2 to 3 in my inventory, and I definitely keep any of the ones I get. Plus 10 to accuracy, very strong. Plus 5% critical, very strong as well. For only minus 8 dodge, once again, it's another 8 dodge, you're talking 10%, so you're probably putting this on a high DPS individual once again. As long as you have a way to heal people, the minus 8 dodge really isn't a huge problem. But 10 accuracy, 5% critical, there's really not too much to analyze behind that except for the fact that's 10% more chance to hit pretty much and another 5% chance to critically strike, which will make up for pretty much that 8 dodge because you'll be killing people much quicker. People this might be great on is, honestly, it would be like anyone: Hellion, Bounty Hunter, Grave Robber, Crusader, Leper. I mean, just go through the DPS list. This is awesome. People who might do more DOT damage don't really need this. The 5% critical obviously It adds an extra 2 turns to Blight, but someone who does raw damage benefits from this much more. Fortifying Garlic. It's very similar to the Cleansing Crystal. It does 7% less Blight and Bleed resistance. Now where the biggest change on this is you get 33% to disease instead of 40% to debuff. I personally like the Fortifying Garlic more because I don't like diseases. This is a great Warren's item because it definitely can increase your ability to resist a disease, whoever you're going to put this on. I often find myself putting these on back row heroes because when they're in the back row, I don't want them getting vomited on, where I don't want them getting blighted in DOT, because I often save all of my cures and remedies and heals for the front 2 individuals. Thus, I usually find the Fortifying Garlic much more beneficial on those individuals. I have used this before on people who just need general increases in any of those categories, and increasing the disease resistance on anybody is just beneficial as well. I don't think you can really go wrong putting the Fortifying Garlic on anybody because increasing those 3 categories is pretty strong, as I said before. Hero's Ring. This is more of a cheese item, I guess I'll call it. Virtue Chance isn't something I usually depended on. If you find yourself getting afflicted a lot, maybe you are going to want to do that. Or if you know there's this one individual who just for some reason always gets targeted or has a lot of bad quirks you just can't get rid of right away that adds more stress, such as zoophobia or something where they take more stress from beasts, whatever have you. I could see it working there, you know, because now you become stronger. You don't have to take all that time to remove the negative quirks, at least right now. I do think eventually once your heroes become very good and you don't have a lot of negative quirks and you learn to reduce your stress, the Hero's Ring becomes a little obsolete. There are some stuff you can do with the Colors of Madness and bosses and final games where maybe you want to try to get yourself to an infliction status to get a virtue chance. However, I just don't think those are very strong because you are solely dependent on RNG at that point. Also, maybe this wouldn't be bad on the Flagellant, since the Flagellant has some ways to do self-stress, thus you can almost push him towards an immediate virtue if you want, if you build around that. Once again, I don't know if you'd recommend that, because there's a 50% chance that he would then go into an affliction at the very beginning of the dungeon, and that's not something you should really be planning on or having to deal with. Legendary Bracer. Legendary Bracer, 20% damage, -1 speed, 10% stress. Going through all of that, I think the 20% damage is worth the trade-off for only -1 speed. If it was like -3, we would be having a different discussion. However, for -1 speed and 20% more damage, that's very good. The 10% stress, that can definitely nickel and dime you. You have to be careful of who you put this on, because if you only bring along heals for HP and not for stress, this individual could get pushed into some pretty higher limits of stress. Thus, you might have to go into a higher stress facility, or worst case scenario, you obviously hit that affliction status, which is something you're not going to want to do. Other than that, the Legendary Bracer is good for anyone who does raw damage because it's just a 20% change. Therefore, this works on ranged and melee abilities, which makes it a pretty good choice as well. We have the Martyrs Seal, 60% damage at death's door, 14% critical at death's door, plus 12 death blow resistance for a maximum HP of 15%. If you have DLC, obviously the Flagellant is probably screaming at you because they are one of the better people to survive at death's door, and hence you get more death blow resistance. The 15% HP also means that they would hit below 40% quicker while still having more health. Therefore, this is the ultimate Flagellant item pretty much. I'm hesitant to put this on other people, even though it technically make their death blow resistance somewhere between 70 and 80%. I know some characters have different death blow resistances, but I think the average is like 60 to 66 off the top of my head. Thus, like I said, you'd be between 70 and 80%. I forget where it caps out. I want to say 85%. The Flagellant would definitely cap out with this, I believe, or at least be very close to it. The problem with that is it's still a 20 to 30% chance that you could die on any given hit. If you take a DOT effect, not only does that add 1 turn, if you get hit a next turn, you could easily stack up 3 to 4 attacks at death's door and it would pretty much ruin you. Because you figured 1 in 5 attacks is going to kill you, and this pretty much, I would argue, would want to push you to be near, well, not near death's door, you would actually want to be on death's door. And I just don't think being on death's door is a great thing. Now, once again, Flagellant works well because he gets stronger as he gets closer. He doesn't necessarily have to be at death's door to be at some of his power points. I usually sold him a Martyrs Seal for a lot of money just because I never liked that idea of just relying being at death's door. Then we finally get to the Tough Ring. The Tough Ring was a trinket I enjoyed and still do enjoy on situational heroes. 10% protection, 15% max HP, minus 15% damage, and 10 stress. So let's go over the positive and the negatives. 10% protection, it's decent, it's not the great, but it's pretty good. You also get 15% max HP, therefore you figure the less damage you're taking and you have more HP, it's pretty good. Now, the minus 15% damage, this isn't brutal to people who rely on DOT or just aren't that hard hitting of a character already and have more utility based abilities. 10% stress is also around that number that I don't really care too much if you have a way to deal with it, or if this person's gonna have a way to dodge, or like I said, get stress healed. The tough ring, I know a couple of situations I have used it, is on a man-at-arms during the Wolf fight. The extra protection and HP right away is very beneficial because all he does is tank. He's not really worried about doing damage, and if I don't accumulate a lot of stress damage, I'm already good to go. Therefore, I really like the tough ring in that situation. Other people who this is beneficial on is also a Vestal, gives her more HP and protection, and if you're not using her as a main damage, she's probably mostly going to heal and do stuns, therefore the damage isn't a big issue, and the stress, you could maybe put on one of those books of sanity, and thus get actually minus 10 instead of plus 10%. That's just a possible combination of the items. Now I'm going to skip over all the hero trinkets here, and we're going to go down into the next section of enemy. The first one we have here is Aria box, minus 25% stress, thus even better than the Book of Sanity by 5%. As you can see the additional notes here, it is dropped by a madman. I'm not going to confirm or deny the 4%, I really never tested this on my own. All I'm going to say is you know they're dropped by madman at least the next 3 boxes, therefore if you're fighting a madman or 2 throughout the dungeons, just turn off the torch and you'll probably have a pretty good chance of getting these after a couple of fights. But coming back to the box itself, I'm going to take the same exact facts from the Book of Sanity and just up it by 5%. Therefore, if you're going to put the Book of Sanity on, but you have this Aria box, just put on the Aria box. We get to the Crescendo box, which I think is an exceptionally strong item. 2 speed, 15% damage are often things you won't see together. Damage and speed are often separate just because of the power of it, or they have some really severe side effects, but for only plus 10% stress, that is not even close to a severe side effect in my honest opinion. This is great for anybody who does, obviously, once again, raw damage and can even lift up those slower speed individuals so they can go do damage first. Anytime you add stress items, once again, make sure you're killing the enemy quick enough, or you have a way to dodge or heal that stress. Those are often my 2 criteria if you're willingly increasing stress. 10% stress isn't the end of the world, just make sure there's no negative quirks on your peoples that increase that stress, such as against maybe like Eldritch or Beast. You don't want the unexpected stress to amplify because you also put this on, or be careful of putting this on if you have another item that already adds another 10 to 20% stress. That's pretty huge because then you're looking at 20 to 30% more stress, and that does matter a lot, more so than 10%. The Overture box, plus 15% HP, plus 8 dodge for minus 2 accuracy. Honestly, the minus 2 accuracy is almost a joke. I really don't even know where they got the number 2 from. It's really random. I feel like that should be minus 2 speed or something, but they typed in accuracy, or the game was like, you know what, we'll just minus 2 from accuracy. Minusing 2% chance to hit for 8 dodge and 15 HP is just worth the trade-off. This is good on literally anybody. Anybody you don't know what to put on them, just slap on the Overture box if you have it available. I know I've put this on Vestals, I've put this on Jesters, I've put this on like Plague Doctors. I mean, anybody who can just benefit. I mean, you can even put this on heavier hitting individuals. Now, I would shy away from the Leopard just because of the accuracy problems, but anyone else where they go from 105 or 110 down to 1.3 or 1.8, that's not a huge deal. And if you have a Jester who can bump that up, you decimate that minus 2 accuracy right away. And the benefits of 15% HP and 8 dodge is just so good. I think these 3 boxes are some of the best items in the game just to swap on really anybody, just because they don't have a lot of drawbacks and their effects are very good. Now we're at the Barristan's Head, 25% protection for plus 20% stress. This one's a little rough, and honestly can be found via collector or secret room, so whatever way you want to do this, that's how you're going to get to it. If you're going to put on this item, just make sure you have a definite stress heal, and I would almost argue just make sure it's a Jester, because other people, or Crusader, because Crusaders can also do targeted. You don't want to rely on things like Flare or Cry Havoc because they're RNG based, and at 20% added stress, you're going to need somebody to get rid of this. That, where you're going to have to counteract the 20% stress with either a Book of Sanity, Aria box, or another item that maybe gives you other benefits and has like minus 5 to 10% stress to bring this back down. Either way, I don't think at 20% stress you can really ignore it. And if you're looking ahead, all of the heads are going to add 20% stress. Therefore, I'm really not going to go over that again too much. So just take what I said about the Barristan's head and the stress, and that's going to apply to the other two, and I'll bring it up a little bit again, but not too much. We now get the Dismas's head. 25% damage, really strong. Minus 10% HP, that hurts a little bit, and the 20% stress. Dismas's head pretty much makes you the definition of a glass cannon, because you can't really do physical damage too well, depending on who you are, and you also can't do stress damage too well, depending on who you are. Now, there are items, as I just said, that can counteract both of those, but I think you're going to have to pick between the HP or the stress. If you have a strong, reliable healer in your party, I'd probably counteract the stress more than the HP, just because at that point you can heal 10%, well, minus 10% max HP more than you can probably with a good stress healer. Because if you take a Vestal, for example, she can heal you with Divine Comfort and everybody, thus she can still be useful to everyone else and not just cater towards the individual with this. But if you had a Jester, they almost have to cater to this individual for most of the time, because even if they're not the focal point of a critical strike or whatnot, that 20% stress could easily make it seem like they get critical when someone else does, and that's going to be too much to depend on. That's a lot of RNG you're hoping that doesn't go against you, and I don't like depending on RNG not going against you. I prepare for the worst, and when the worst doesn't happen, it's a good day. But when the worst does happen, you sometimes only have yourself to blame because you were erring on the side of, I guess, pride or denial that this wouldn't happen to you. And then when it does, you're like, well, what was I gonna do? I like to take that away. Thus, adding a reliable way to reduce stress is certainly a good one. We get to Junias' head, 30% healing skills. That's pretty strong. It's one of the highest ones out there, I believe. But once again, 20% stress. Clearly, this is used on individuals who have, I would say, pretty good healing base. I wouldn't put this on an Antiquarium, I wouldn't put this on an Arbalest, I wouldn't put this on a Crusader. There's probably other items out there that will get similar results, maybe only by -1 or -2 off, but you'll save yourself the plus 20% stress. Now, the two individuals who I think can benefit the most from this are the Occultist and the Vestal. I'd be more comfortable putting this on the Occultist over the Vestal, because the Occultist has a higher dodge than the Vestal does naturally. Therefore, he can probably miss a couple of extra attacks against him, while the Vestal is probably going to soak it all in. So that includes criticals, stressful incantations, and tempting goblets, which you're going to see down below there as well. Therefore, if a Vestal has this, make sure you maybe have someone who can protect her, increase the dodge of the party, or once again, a minus stress trinket, because plus 20% stress is not nickel and diming you. That is like taking away a quarter and dollar every time, and it'll add up. Because the stressful incantation of the Cultist Switch, I believe off the top of my head, does 20 stress. Therefore, you're adding an extra 4. Therefore, you figured after 3 to 4 abilities, you have almost another 20 stress stacked on top of you already. And if other people around her get critically struck, you figured she's going to take a lot more stress than just the natural stress part of your party taking a critical. And that's not something she can really handle well, because she's not killing, and she's also not getting a lot of critical strikes on her own, thus she doesn't naturally reduce her own stress pool. Therefore, that's something you have to consider, because if this individual gets highly stressed, is there a way they can de-stress themselves, or is there at least a reliable way they can take care of themselves a little bit until the Jester's ready? If you have a Jester and a Vestal in the lineup, the Jester will most likely be on Inspiring Tune duty on your Vestal the whole entire fight. Tempting Goblet. This is one I got recently. I kind of forgot about it existed. I've always killed Bone Royalty, but I never really turned off the light, and once I did a couple of times, I got this right away. Let's look at it. I kind of like it. I know it has some big drawbacks at the bottom there, but let's talk about them. 20% max HP. Big. I don't want to say that's just big. Plus 3 speed. Also really good. Plus 8 dodge. Excellent. Now, we get to 25% stress and minus 10% virtue. I'm not going to care about the virtue so much. You're saying, why? You get plus 25% stress. Yeah, that's pretty big. Just put on a Book of Sanity or Aria's box and just literally cancel out those 2 bottom negatives pretty much. Because if you have 0% more stress and you're already pretty reliable at making sure your party doesn't get hurt too bad, the virtue chance negative isn't that big of a deal either. Therefore, if we look at this as a sum game, you get 8 speed, 3 dodge, and 20 max HP for one item, or for 2 items. I would say that's a win. Some items would give you 20 max HP, but for -1 speed, and other things would give you like 2 speed, 8 dodge, but for minus move resistance and stun resistance. This is just a flat out, give me the 20, give me the 3, give me the 8. I think is a great item to keep on. If you have a Jester on, you can even just keep the plus 25% stress. Now you do have to be careful, and you do have to make sure this individual gets stress healed even when they're at 30 or 40, because there's no guarantee that in 2 turns or maybe even a turn and a half, this individual goes from 30 to 80 just like that. I mean, a critical comes your way and they get hit with a tempting goblet or stressful incantation, they can literally be sitting at 70 or 80, and they were, a good 70 away from being afflicted, and now they're only a good 20 away from getting an affliction. Also, you may have to bring along things to cancel the horror ability. If you let those on for 3 rounds of 6 each, where 6 damage for 30 rounds, that's 18, or even 4 for 3. However it goes, you figure that would almost be probably 15 to 18, and that starts to add up. One final tip on this, make sure you have no negative quirks that compound with this ability, because 35% to 40% extra stress is just way too much, and you just have to avoid this trinket on that person then.